What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
Guys, we've got a great episode coming your way today. UFC 329 recap. Bit of a letdown in the main event, and that is understating it to another level. So we're going to talk what happened, what's next, if anything, for Conor McGregor. Also, Max Holloway, where does he go from here? Paddy the Baddy had an incredible win last night, instantaneously almost getting the submission over Benoit Saint-Denis. There was a couple of key performances, including fight of the night and a couple of performance bonuses of the night. We'll get into those, as well as Gable Steveson's return. And we'll finalize the podcast today just briefly touching on Arman Tsarukyan's performance at RAF last night and some of the things that transpired there, because he kind of fits right into the lightweight discussion. So as always, if there's any particular topic that you're most interested in hearing about, you'll find it in the timestamps below. But Nick, we're going to start today with the main event. Big letdown, right? That's kind of the balloon was filled to maximum capacity after that Paddy the Baddy walkout and the quick submission. And then the foggy dew hits the speakers, the literal fog in the stage, the notorious B.I.G. Conor McGregor comes out, and we think we're about to have an exciting main event, right? Not like the most amazing fight ever. I don't think anybody was really expecting that, but we were expecting to see, after 5 years, Conor McGregor come back and at least give us something for a couple of rounds. And we got none of that. Unfortunately, we got what appears to be, from all the doctors that I've been watching on social media and hearing opinions of, somewhat of an ACL tear. Looks like is going to be the diagnosis. Now, we haven't seen a full medical report from the UFC staff or any surgeon in Vegas that's looking at McGregor, but he's looking at one or more ligament tears in his knee. I think it's pretty safe to say that. And the first thing that everybody's saying, right, is, oh, conspiracy, Conor didn't want to fight, pre-existing injury, came in with this. All I'll say is I think we need to kind of drown out the noise for a minute and just look at the facts as they are. Conor McGregor was drilling that kick in the back warming up, just like he drilled the Jose Aldo knockout all those years ago, and then delivered it in the cage. Conor does that. He has a move that he likes to start a fight with. Maybe he's seen something in tape that he thinks he can exploit on his opponent. But the point of me saying that is, if you have a compromised knee, the dumbest thing you can do, and you know that, the dumbest thing you can do is come out and do one of the most physically demanding and knee-taxing mechanics, which is a jump kick to the head, landing all of your weight back down on one leg. You wouldn't do that if you had a pre-existing condition. I truly believe last night, especially after seeing the warm-up footage that the UFC posted thereafter, this was just one of those things that sucks, right?
Freak accident.
Conor McGregor got back in there and he tore his ACL on the first move of the fight. And, before I hand it to you just briefly, had that been any fight on the prelims or the early prelims, John Garza came up and took a fight short notice. And, he's kind of a guy, okay, oh crap, John Garza started the fight with a high kick to the head and tore his ACL. Tough break for a young man who got an opportunity. Sucks for him. Hope to see him back soon. But because it's Conor, because there was 5 years off, because he's the biggest star the sport's ever seen, you're going to hear the conspiracy, the pre-existing injury. I don't think it was that, man. I really think he just tore his ACL in there, and it sucks.
Yeah, it was one of those situations where you really can't account for the 0.1% opportunities that happen in this sport. And damage is the number one thing. And we were all assuming that Max Holloway would get a lot of damage done on Conor McGregor. And realistically, Conor was a big underdog in this. We all knew that he was likely not going to beat a very active, very relevant fighter in Max Holloway. But we thought, okay, given the circumstances, the way he's been approaching life as a human being and righting some of the wrongs, we can at least see him, bring us some of the magic, right? It's not that Conor McGregor was this Habib who had never lost and we were expecting him to come back 5 years later and continue like a win streak.
And be flawless,
he's in victory and defeat. the magic was always kind of there. Even if the fights were short-lived, even if he wasn't getting his hand raised, he was still able to garner a lot of attention, more than anybody else in the sport, and give us these special nights. And look, I said this last night on the live stream, Conor McGregor has experienced the highest of highs that any sport can give you. But combat sports is a little bit different because the highest highs are also coupled with the lowest lows. Now, the interesting thing is, this sport is almost weird where, like, yes, if you make it to the UFC, you can experience some pretty high highs and maybe some pretty low lows. But if you're on the prelims, it's not quite as monumental. Conor McGregor has done more in this sport on the high level than anybody else, right? All the records, all the pay-per-view records that he holds, the largest gate, 5 years off. All of the highs that he has are also coupled with the most extreme lows.
Well, leg break in a main event where he had to be carted off, you know, because his leg was literally snapped in half. That's as low of a low can be.
Right. And then you come back after 5 years and obviously this fight went so south so quickly. I mean, it was legitimately the first shot that anybody threw, and he was kind of right by saying Max Holloway wouldn't lay a glove on him. Unfortunately for Conor, that was true, but it's not because Max couldn't hit him. It's because Max showed a lot of class and was trying to find a safe way for Conor to not take unnecessary damage. He was trying to be, you know, a good business partner, if you will, for Conor McGregor. And once he realized that Conor mentally had shown signs that, look, I can't get through this fight. We saw something very similar with the Carlos Ulberg and Yuri Prochazka thing, right? Carlos Ulberg was in there, tore his ACL, and basically had 1 or 2 shots left in the chamber. It just so happened that Yuri Prochazka was there to be hit by them. Max Holloway was not anywhere near Conor when Conor threw the 1 or 2 punches that he did throw, right? It was just one of those situations where once you tear your leg, a ligament like an ACL in your leg, and I know this from personal experience, you literally can stand for a little bit, right? That speaks to him being able to walk out of the arena. But that is short-lived, and very soon after that, your leg starts to swell up, and you can no longer bear weight with that leg. So, yeah, it's just crazy to see this sport, how you can go from being the biggest guy in the world and literally probably had the biggest pop that T-Mobile Arena's ever had, including his cards. This was a 5-year layoff met with a return from Conor McGregor. The crowd was erupting. It was almost like the Sphere could have, you know, picked up and rolled off into the Vegas desert because Vegas was just so electric. There wasn't a hotel room available.
T-Mobile was full from the beginning too.
Right.
Like you always see pans of the stadium.
Yeah.
Even on a big fight night, and during the prelims, it's about half full.
Right.
Last night, it looked like the damn thing was filled to the brim to capacity from like the early prelims.
Well, and people paid a lot of hard-earned money to be there. I mean, the biggest gate in UFC history. That means the tickets were pretty expensive. And given the fact that last night was actually a record-breaking night, I think they ended up having a total of 8 first-round finishes, including the Conor McGregor one, which was weird, but technically does fall into the category of a first-round finish. It's just one of those situations where you got to get to those events early. If you pay all that money to be there and the fights are rolling that way, the matchmakers did a great job with the card, and it just sucks that the final show, after such an amazing card, Conor McGregor walks out and we don't even get to see a true exchange between the two of them. Now, do I feel bad for Conor? Yes. Do I hope that we can see him, you know, rehab and get himself into surgery, get himself feeling okay again, and maybe have one more crack at a shot against like a Michael Chandler or something? Yes, I want to see that. But it's really going to be a difficult road back to competition for Conor, because he said as much himself on Twitter last night, I'm in a dark place right now. I can only, you know, call this hell, basically. Yeah. So you feel for Conor McGregor, like we were talking about, he never misses an opportunity when it comes to being an entertainer. And for him to forego talking to Joe Rogan to let us in on what's going on in his mind, that tells me this was not a pre-existing injury that he came in to just steal a bag from the UFC with. He was truly upset with the results that ensued as soon as the fight started. Yeah. And was it a careless mistake? Maybe. Was it a dumb decision to go out there and try to throw that kick? Yes, I would say it probably was. Now, even if you have a leg with a steel rod in it, that's one of those situations where you might say, okay, maybe it would be better if Conor comes in with a boxing heavy style. But what I'll say is he threw the leg with the steel plate in it, and that was not the issue. The planted leg is the one that is actually the issue. And just to personalize real quick, whenever I had I've torn my meniscus, I've torn my ACL, and I've had a semi-fracture of a MCL. And one thing that even is true to this day is I have an easier time kicking the torn leg than I do planting on the torn leg and kicking with it. So if my right leg is good, I can stand and throw my left leg just fine. When I start trying to throw my right leg with my left leg being the one that's on the ground keeping me up, that's when things start to feel a little bit funny in there. And yeah, I've had the exact same injury. I don't know if it's an ACL, but I'm going to lean heavily towards it being an ACL, mostly because he was able to walk out of the arena. When I tore my ACL, I was able to walk off the football field. That's where it happened for me. And then, an hour later, 30 minutes later, I couldn't walk anymore. But that adrenaline's there, and technically you don't need an ACL to walk. But when it happens immediately, like when I tore my meniscus, it was a bucket handle tear of the meniscus, and there was no walking that took place after that because it's locked in with the bucket handle, and you simply just can't bend your leg or straighten it. So I think the injury was truly one of those freak accidents. It really does suck that everybody that went to the event, or even us, we were live streaming expecting just some sort of an amazing show. We all expected Max to win, but at the same time, we were hoping we'd get a little bit of magic and see Conor being in a good mental headspace, coming in looking like vintage Conor. I mean, he had the mohawk like he had in his debut against Marcus Brimage. I think this was like a rebirth for Conor McGregor. But he's been talking about his relationship and closeness to God. And everybody says, I think it was Mike Tyson who made the quote famous, when God is on your side and close with you in life, the devil is also just as close. And so it's one of those things where Conor's going to have to do a lot of soul searching to make sure he stays on the straight and narrow. He said he'll be at church today, so I like that for him. I don't want to see a guy go from being sober and clean and being a family man to having a catastrophic injury and disastrous night like this go to, all right, I'm going to my after party and I'm going to go drink until the sun comes up.
Revert back to his old ways.
Right.
And I like that he said that. He said, he's in a dark place in his tweets that he put out, and he said, but I'm not going to be tempted. I'm going to stay on the straight and narrow. And the final thing he said in the quote was, I will return.
Yes.
Now, that's the perfect segue into what is next for Conor, because you have to feel for him, and you don't feel like, at least I don't, feel like much is next.
Right.
There's a very narrow path for Conor. So let's look at the facts as we know them. You say ACL, most of the people who are, experts in the area, albeit they're armchair, they're watching and making, judgment without looking at an MRI or being there to physically examine Conor, they're saying ACL. So what does that mean? Well, he's in Las Vegas. The best surgeons in the world, have close relationships with the UFC.
Sure.
ACL tears or, leg breaks, leg fractures, like what happened to Conor the first time, is pretty rare. Only happened a few times.
Yeah.
But a full ACL tear, pretty common in the UFC.
And in all sports.
Exactly. The surgeons are working on that pretty regularly.
Yeah.
There's guys that are doing that multiple every single week. So Conor will be in with a good surgeon,
right,
likely, if he hasn't already, within the next couple of days.
Right.
Then starts the rehab. So he's probably 9 months away from where he could realistically enter into like any semblance of a training camp.
Right.
Which would mean he needs 3 to 4 months to get back, which puts him at a year to a year and a half out.
Right.
Now, I think he's almost up on his 38th birthday. I think his birthday's in July. So I think he's about to turn 38. So we're talking about 39, potentially 39 and a half year old Conor McGregor,
right,
who hasn't looked good in almost a decade, if we're being honest. And, what does that leave him, right? Max Holloway he's got a knockout win not that long ago over the current champion.
Right.
Max Holloway's on a different trajectory. Max is calling rematch. I don't think the UFC will go that way. I think, let's be real. Michael Chandler's the one that makes sense. The guy that's like 2-6 or 2-7 in the UFC now, just looked really bad himself against Mauricio Rufy. The poor guy has deserved red panty night. Yeah. Let's get the two guys together and say, look, Michael, we really don't need your services in the UFC anymore. Your record, you haven't won in a long time. You haven't been relevant since you first came into the UFC. Pretty much everything after that's been loss after loss. And Conor, we know the story.
Yeah.
You've been 5 years removed now, another leg injury. We really don't have much marketability juice left to squeeze out of your lemon either, but you do have one mega fight left on your contract that we have to pay you somewhere in the realm of $30 million for. So here's what we're going to do. If either one of you guys want to fight in the UFC again, we're going to put you together.
Right.
This is going to be your final fight for both of you. I think Mike will be somewhere near 40. Conor will be somewhere near 40. This fight's been 5 years in the making. Have at it, boys.
Right.
You know, whatever happens, happens. It's a level of competition that's realistic for Conor.
Right.
Because coming back, you know, after a year and a half, max is not going to be a realistic level of competition. That's going to be a mismatch.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that the only thing left for Conor, and then Conor said very clearly with Ariel Helwani before this fight that he is going to test free agency after his final fight.
Sure. And
so if we're talking future after the immediate future, dare I even say it, we're probably looking at a Jake Paul fight somewhere in like the, you know, MVP promotions if Conor, because Conor is going to, you know, he realistically at about 42 or 43 years old won't be able to compete anymore. He just simply, his body's not going to hold up.
Right.
It's already kind of not holding up. So he's still, you know, got 4 kids. Maybe him and Dee want to have some more. He has a marketability and he has the very rare ability to go out and get paydays of $30 million or more. And a Jake Paul fight would pay him that type of money. A bare knuckle fight against whoever would pay him that type of money. So I think he will try to fight out his contract, probably against Chandler. And then I believe he's going to go, you know, market his services and get 2 or 3 more big paydays before he cannot any longer physically compete. So that's kind of how I see it for Conor. It's certainly not high-level competition. It's probably Michael Chandler, and then it's some gimmick MMA fights or gimmick boxing matches. Unfortunately, that's the way I see it.
Yeah. Conor McGregor didn't get to scratch the itch of competition that he was so eager to showcase us like, look, I'm still here. No, everybody had reasonable expectations. Unless you're like a casual who only tunes in for Conor McGregor and you think, oh, there's still a chance he's the best fighter in the world. We all knew there was like realistic expectations. We just want to see a fun fight. And it pains me that we're sitting in here in the studio unable to break down any technical aspects of this fight.
Right.
But we kind of just have to talk about the story as it is, which is we didn't get a fight. We had a very upset Conor McGregor. And he's a guy who also tells us right off the bat, you know, as he's getting wheeled off in a stretcher, hey, I'm not done. I'm going to come back one more time. Now, will the return part 2 be as anticipated as this one? No. Probably not. It's going to lose some of the luster. Some of the people that maybe bought tickets or you know, flew out to Vegas to go see it aren't going to do the same thing again. They're not going to get burned by the Conor McGregor, you know, body giving out twice. So I think that there's definitely going to be a limit to how big his return can be if he decides to make one. But I agree totally. It should be against Michael Chandler. Michael deserves that. Skill for skill, I would say at this stage in their career, it would be the most competitive thing that Conor could get into in the UFC. And then I agree with you that he should go test free agency. The UFC is not going to want to do more than one more with him, if that. And they're going to let that be in Conor McGregor's court, right? The ball's going to be in his court. If he says he wants to fight one more time, they're not going to watch a guy who just broke the record for the most attendance in the best gate of all time and say, no, you can't do it, because he still, you know, is the biggest draw in the sport, even after suffering that kind of loss.
Well, they have to. They have to give him the fight, or they have to let him out of his contract.
Right. Oh, yeah. And then that would probably come with paying him, right? Something to...
Or allowing him to test free agency. And the last thing Dana's going to do is let Conor go fight Jake Paul on a Mondo card on Netflix. He's just Dana's going to try to prevent that at all costs.
Right. And trust me, the sharks will come swimming. When Conor McGregor's available, even if he's 40, 41 years old, any of these guys that are one-off promoters or people that are trying to get into the fight space, even some of the boxing promoters, will want to get their hands on him. They're going to be willing to pay him big money. And just to personalize it, you know, I had dreams of being an MMA fighter, had the ACL, MCL, meniscus all torn, and I was eager to compete, but I couldn't kick, get kicked, or wrestle. So I was like, well, what can I do? I can box. So I went over, did my boxing, and luckily I've been able to get back into MMA and do everything that MMA encompasses. But Conor in a boxing match would be interesting. We've seen Floyd Mayweather now back out of like 3 fights this year. I think he was supposed to fight Mike Tyson, Manny Pacquiao, and I think there was one more exhibition. I don't know who it was against, maybe a Greek guy or something like that. But I guarantee you, some of these guys that are big names that are a little bit older or just trying to do some sort of one-off big card or big event would be willing to give Conor McGregor an opportunity. I think the best thing we could see Conor do is fight Michael Chandler in the UFC. Both of them get sent away and be on their merry way into free agency. And then we can see, maybe the boxers like Floyd Mayweather come chirping and they want to make some money. Obviously, Floyd needs the money right now. Conor would love a big payday like that again. Who knows? Maybe bare knuckle would be a place that Floyd versus Conor could meet. That'd be something interesting. There's no kicks involved. There's no grappling. He can't run across the squared circle and throw a jumping head kick on Floyd Mayweather and BKFC. So I think there are options. And my thing is, we don't want to deprive a guy of an opportunity, right? Conor McGregor came back because he wanted to scratch that itch, and he didn't get that opportunity. He got to feel fight week. He got to go through the press. He got to do everything. But all of that is peanuts compared to actually getting in there and displaying your skills that you've been working on. That's what fighters want to do at the end of the day. They want to work really hard on stuff and then come present it to the world. This is what I've been working on. And unfortunately, he didn't get to do any of that. So I'm not one to say that what happened to Conor is a fluke, or I am the one to say it's a fluke. I don't think it was a undisclosed injury that he came into the event just to steal a bag from the UFC. I think that this happened and it was a freak accident to the highest level. And if he does want to scratch that itch one more time, stay on the straight and narrow. Look, this past 6 months has been really good for Conor McGregor. People have been listening to his words and believing what he's saying. We're watching his every move. It doesn't appear like he's having substance abuse issues. He's not drinking too much. He said at his after party he wouldn't be drinking. As a matter of fact, he said after this loss, I'm going to go to church tomorrow, which is today. And, I think that Conor McGregor is one of ours, right? He's in the MMA community. We can't just shun him. We can't just blacklist him and say, you're done and call his career when it's really it's on his terms and his options and what he wants to do that mostly matters. And I don't think that anybody would be upset if Conor did get one more opportunity, and hopefully he just doesn't come out and do something crazy to wind up with another freak injury.
I'll say one more crazy thing about my opinion on Conor's future before we move on. I don't think that the UFC should main event him if they allow him to come back and fight Michael Chandler or Max Holloway or whoever it is. I think that Conor McGregor is a proven commodity. He draws crowds.
Yes.
He also asked for a 3-round fight. That's what
he said
wanted.
That was a rumor. Who knows if that's true or not?
I believe he asked for it. I think and it makes sense, right? If you're Conor McGregor and you're going up against the output machine in Max Holloway, what makes the most sense for you? A 3-round fight.
So, and durability is also a real thing with Fight Camp, right? When you're training for a 15-minute fight, you have a certain amount of output that you can throw out there. When you add 10 more minutes, you're adding a significant portion to your training camp. And at his age, with his injuries, maybe 25 minutes and preparing for that for 6 months is too much on the body. Who knows if 15 minutes would also be too much, but I would assume the workload would be slightly lighter. Obviously, he's not cutting weight, so I don't think it was a dehydrated ligament sort of issue. I think that, 15 minutes would be more suited for Conor, but it is hard to pay a guy what they're paying him and not have him main event. But at the same time, you really can't you can't expect the people that are trying to go watch a big fight night to wait for the main event and then something like that happen. I get the frustration and I get how they would want to prevent that from happening again. Maybe we just see an Uno reverse. And look, in my opinion, Paddy the Baddy got the baton passed to him for the biggest star in the sport. Now, I know Ilya's a very big star. I know Alex Pereira's a very big star. Arman Tsarukyan is even drawing some serious numbers these days. But I think after this fight week, Paddy the Baddy is the number 2 guy behind Conor McGregor as far as star power and the ability to become a cultural icon. So Paddy might wind up being the main event. I think that, their schedules will obviously line up, and hopefully we see Paddy in there sooner than later. But I think the only type of person that Conor would be willing to walk in before would be a guy like Paddy the Baddy.
Yeah, see, I think I do think that you can co-main event Conor and have the same effect.
Okay.
And I think when you say it's kind of hard to pay Conor what you pay Conor and not main event him, I kind of take the opposite stance of that. You can't afford for the fans to pay what the fans pay and get that kind of main event. So when you think about Conor coming back, him and Michael Chandler would likely be the opponent, have no business, either one of them, fighting for 25 minutes.
Right.
And then you have a main event. Let's say it's him and Paddy are not going to line up schedule-wise, I hope, because I hope Paddy fights in 6 months or less.
Yes.
But let's say Paddy fights one time and then Conor does come back a year and a half from now, and it lines up. You put or an Alex Pereira, or let's say Topuria crawls his way back to a title. You put that as the main event. So that way you're signaling to the fans, look, we're going to put a lot of resources into a banger numbered card, a banger main event. So we're going to go on this Conor McGregor ride one more time because he wants it and because contractually we have to give it to him. But just know that if he's unreliable, like he's proven to be the last 5 years, we got Topuria versus Pimblett. We got Pereira versus Ulberg. Whatever. Fill in the blank. We got Makhachev versus whoever. So, I think that's the only way to handle a McGregor fight going forward. And as crazy as it sounds, I think you have to co-main event him. Yeah. And I think you have to give him the 3-round fight that he wants. But I think I want to move to Paddy, but before we do, there was a guy who got his hand raised last night, and I think it's important that we bring up Max for a minute. Yeah. Even though he really didn't have to do anything except get in there and cash a check.
Talk about humble and victory, right?
Yeah. Didn't have to even cut weight. And the thing about Max is he's on a different trajectory. He's still 34 years old. He's still very active. And as I said earlier in the show, he has a knockout win over the current champion. So Max is sitting pretty. The Charles thing kind of sucks, but I think the UFC is going to put Charles in the penalty box for that fight, unfortunately. So Max versus Ilya 2 at 155, where Max is more durable. Interesting. Max versus Paddy. That works. Their schedules line up. Max versus Justin, if Justin wants to get his get back, all those things make sense. So Max is kind of sitting pretty. I don't know what they'll do. I think if Topuria wants to come back in December, there's 2 people now on the short list. One would be Max and one would be Paddy. Yeah. But just specifically to Max's future, before we move into Pimblett, what do you think is next for Holloway?
Max Holloway is a classy individual. I really love how he managed, and navigated this entire fight night with Conor McGregor. He showed class. He also was able to entertain a little bit and get in Conor's face. When Conor put his forehead up against his, he pushed right back. It was like a couple of bulls squaring off with one another. He was 100% the right business partner for Conor McGregor's return. And the amount of class and respect he showed Conor, like he said it himself, I don't want to give this guy unnecessary damage. He's already damaged enough. I don't want to beat a guy while he's down. I think he said, I don't want to kick a dog, like an injured dog. And I totally get that. Like a lot of people watch fighting and they think, well, if I did that, I'd love to do it, but I need to fight somebody that I know I can kick their ass, right? Max Holloway's like, I'm not going to go fight somebody that I know I can just beat up. He's injured. I'd rather fight Conor at his best than fight him at all, right? I don't want to go out there and just say, oh, I beat up Conor McGregor. He doesn't even look at this like a true win. Obviously, the check's going to clear. Obviously, the win is going to go in his column. He is now the most recent guy to get a win over Conor McGregor. He won Red Panty Night. But good things need to happen to Max Holloway because he showed class. He showed us that, even in a circumstance like that, he was able to give Conor his credit. He tried to get the crowd to, give Conor a pop, which is so crazy, right? The entire crowd goes insane when Conor walks out. Like I said, Vegas was literally shaking. And then he goes, guys, give it up for Conor McGregor. He's a true warrior. And it was however many people were left in T-Mobile Arena that hadn't just ushered out quickly.
Kicked the doors open and stormed out.
They kicked the doors. I bet there was, a chaos on the Vegas Strip. Yeah. But whoever else was left was booing Conor McGregor. And it's just so fickle, this sport. 1 second they love you. Legitimately a minute later or 69 seconds, however long the fight was, they are booing you and so frustrated that you blew the opportunity for them to watch a great fight. But again, you have to look at it as a freak accident, because I don't think he came in with a pre-existing injury, and Max Holloway showed up ready to go. So I don't think that, it just sucks, because Max is such a fun guy for us to break down on a technical side. Conor, great guy to break down on a technical side, and we don't get to do any of that. So I'm a little bit sad that we're robbed of that opportunity, but I don't feel near as bad as, say, a Conor McGregor does today. And Max Holloway also didn't get to scratch that itch like we were talking about earlier. He wanted to go out there and compete. He's been, one of the top guys in the sport now for years, but he's also been in the UFC for like 14 years himself. So he's just one of those guys that is a true competitor to the highest level. He wants to compete, and this is not how he wanted to get his hand raised, but I'm glad he did get his hand raised, and I love the fact that he has a win over Justin Gaethje, because Justin Gaethje, in my opinion, was watching this fight very closely to see who his next opponent was going to be. I think he was hoping, with his fingers crossed, that Conor McGregor could pull off something miraculous, and then they could have some sort of Conor McGregor versus Justin Gaethje for an undisputed title at 155. That would have likely been the biggest fight of all time. But Justin Gaethje also might want to get his get back on Max Holloway, because he knocked him out in the most spectacular knockout the UFC's ever seen, UFC 300, the very last second of the fight. That was so epic, it was insane. But I also understand if Justin Gaethje wants to call it a career. And if he does, things open up tremendously for Max Holloway. I mean, I would say, even though Max didn't win against Charles Oliveira, and even though he didn't get to actually fight against Conor McGregor, his fan base is growing. People love Max Holloway, and the win over Justin Gaethje puts him in a really good spot given the UFC's 155 division and how everybody's sitting right now. Arman probably needs one more before they're going to reasonably give him a title shot. Ilya needs to take some time off, but he's obviously not going to get an immediate rematch. Justin wants nothing to do with that. Who else is there? Paddy, there's an option for Paddy versus Justin in a rematch, but I'm not as into that fight as I would be Max versus Justin again. And also, the reason I like Max versus Justin so much is because that would likely mean we draw into Paddy versus Ilya, which those two guys have not had anything but any nice words to say about one another. And the first person to come after Ilya Topuria when he got beat up on the White House lawn by Justin Gaethje was Paddy Pimblett.
Yeah, so, that's perfect. So let's move into Paddy now. I think that's Max's future is pretty clear cut. It's either Paddy, Ilya, or Justin. One of those three will be the next person that Max squares off against.
Sure.
And now Paddy Pimblett, beautiful performance.
Yeah.
I mean, opportunistic submission there,
the
right?
biggest winner of the night.
By far, BSD, and also a pretty damn big pop from the crowd. He said, I'm going to be second to Conor.
Yeah.
And he was, but it was a close second.
Yeah.
I mean, Paddy with the hands. My son was running around the house doing this morning, and he's 3 years old. So, Paddy Pimblett is becoming a household name. He's becoming a fan favorite.
Sure.
And he's showing how good of a fighter he is. A lot of people called him a fraud after the Justin Gaethje fight. Well, that's been proven to be silly, because we know what Justin's done since then.
People are still bringing up the Jared Gordon fight. They're like, he didn't actually beat Jared Gordon. Like, Paddy has evolved so much since that day. And everybody needs to go back and look at his fight with Justin Gaethje to realize how competitive that actually was. Obviously, Justin beat him up, but Paddy was having moments in that fight. He looked just fine. Paddy is legitimately one of the top 3 best lightweights in the world right now. And we got to put some respect on his name, because we've never seen anybody come, deal with Benoit Saint-Denis as easily as he did. And look, Benoit came out there with a game plan that we kind of all anticipated. I'm going to get real, aggressive with the pressure, throw some hands, change my levels, shoot in. And I think that Paddy the Baddy just had a really, really good game plan to solve this problem. One thing I think Paddy did was he probably studied Dustin Poirier's fight with BSD, where BSD wound up in a guillotine position multiple times. Dustin tried to jump the gilly. I think he realized, Paddy that is, that you can't really jump a guillotine and have a very high success rate at this level of the UFC. But man, the adaptations that he put into that. So he basically, on a technical side of things, right? As soon as BSD changed levels and shot in with the head on the outside, Paddy got, naturally your hand sort of falls into that guillotine position. But that's usually not enough because of the attack of the wrestler. Usually they change angles. If you're up against the cage, you can't create very much space. What Paddy did was he was up against the cage, the arm falls into that guillotine position, and then immediately what he did was create a distance between between BSD's shoulder, which was on his torso, and his torso. And that's what opened up his ability to put the other arm in and then have a two-hand sort of choke situation. Now, from there, you obviously have to have black belt level skills to find a Darce Anaconda Peruvian necktie, which we have labeled, by the way, first people to do it, the Liverpool necktie or the Scouser necktie. Let's call it one of those two things, because this was a modified choke. And when you have nothing but black belts on the panel, right? You were talking to Dominic Cruz and Chael Sonnen and all the people that talk about fight, Daniel Cormier, all these guys, they know a lot about grappling, and they're all going, Paddy, what was that choke? And he's like, dude, that's my grappling. I don't have a real name for it. About 4 or 5 weeks ago, somebody showed me the Peruvian necktie. I thought it was pretty cool. I didn't exactly do that. I kind of modified it and did it my own little thing. But basically what it was a Liverpool necktie. And Paddy's going to make that famous. I guarantee you a lot of jiu-jitsu gyms are going to start showing people how to set that up. I bet all the content creators in the jiu-jitsu world are going to show us how to break down Paddy's submission. But I just thought it was a flawless victory. To beat a guy like Benoit Saint-Denis is no easy task, and to do it in under a minute just speaks volumes to Paddy's level on the ground. Now that opens up a lot of opportunities, because he said, look, I'll fight the posh boy Arman Tsarukyan. I'll fight Ilia Topuria. I'd love to get my hands on the little chorizo. And he also said, if Charles Oliveira wants it, he can get it. As a matter of fact, he can get submitted too. So if Paddy the Baddy is really trying to go out there and submit the guy with the most submissions in the UFC and Charles Oliveira, I think there's a lot of opportunities for him to grow even more in this sport. And I think Paddy is coming into this on a Conor McGregor card, and this is just a perfect catapult for him to shoot into superstardom. The hair was on point. The dance, the walkout was on point. Like he said, I'm looking out and I'm seeing Mike Tyson, Vince Vaughn, Theo Vaughn, Mel Gibson, Sophie Cunningham, everybody doing the Paddy the Baddy dance, and the heads will roll. Everything about it was so cool. And I think that, being a guy like Paddy who came from nothing and now made his dream come true of getting to the UFC, but that wasn't enough for him. Now he wants to be the world champion. He's got his eyes laser focused on that world title, and he was inches away from it with the Justin Gaethje fight. But I think next time we see Paddy out there, it's either going to be for a #1 contenders match, or it will actually be for the undisputed world title.
Well, a BMF fight isn't a bad option while we wait for the dust to settle at 155.
Does Paddy qualify as a BMF?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the fight with Justin Gaethje, right?
Sure.
He was Ilia Topuria. A lot of people were saying, well, this guy, is BMF worthy. He knocked out the BMF champion in Max Holloway, and I think Paddy the Baddy showed a lot of toughness in that fight with Gaethje, and then came back and did what he did against Benoit Saint-Denis. And I think that the UFC is not overtly saying it, but they're kind of looking for somebody who can go in there and kind of stick it to Charles, because I think they were unhappy with the way that Charles performed against Max Holloway. And Paddy Pimblett has the skill set to grapple with Charles.
Yeah.
He also has the skill set to keep the fight on the feet if he wants. And
the durability as well, which Charles does not have these days, but Paddy is a Scouser, and Scousers don't get knocked out.
And he's proven that, right? He's the Scouser that doesn't get knocked out, but last night he didn't even take a punch, right? So he showed some really high-level grappling against a guy who's on a 4-fight finish streak.
Yeah.
And none of those fights have gone out of the second round, right? 2 knockouts, 2 submissions, very high-level grappler, good power in his hands. Paddy made it look sort of easy.
Yeah.
And so much like Max Holloway, there are a few clear paths. Path number 1, you can do Paddy versus Ilia in Liverpool. That's huge.
Awesome fight.
Path number 2, you try to get him to take that BMF belt off of Charles, because stylistically, maybe Mick Maynard, Sean Shelby, they think that's a good opportunity. Maybe Paddy might never reach undisputed title, but maybe we could get a BMF around his waist if they don't do the Diego Lopez fight.
And he might be a main event also in his next fight. And if there's a belt on the line, great. But if not, maybe he comes in and gets a BMF title.
Yeah, and then option 3 would be the Justin Gaethje rematch, which I don't think that'll be the route that they go, because I don't think that, Justin's teetering on retirement.
Right.
And a rematch against a guy he beat less than a year ago doesn't really, if I'm Justin, I'm not chomping at the bit for that.
Been there, done that, got the batty bangs. I don't need to fight Paddy Pimblett again. Just like he's saying with Ilia Topuria, right? He's like, I don't need to fight Ilia again. I'm not giving him an immediate rematch. You know, nobody really thought that Paddy would be getting a rematch, but a lot of people didn't think he would get past Benoit Saint-Denis. He did. So I was never of the mindset that Paddy should get a rematch with Justin Gaethje, but as that fight gets further away and we see how the landscape of the division is changing, and we also get a real look into just how good Paddy is compared to everybody else in the division, I honestly don't think that a rematch is the worst option, but I just don't see Justin Gaethje taking that. He's already done it.
No, and yeah, so I think Charles and Ilia are the two most likely next opponents for Pimblett. BSD, no harm, no foul, and I don't want to touch on him too much because we have a lot more to cover in this episode. But you know, he got caught, right? Yeah. He was on a 4-fight win streak, finished all 4 opponents, came out and he got caught by a title challenger, a former title challenger. No harm, no foul. Benoit Saint-Denis luckily didn't take any real damage. He could come back and fight again in 3 months. But let's move into a few things before we get into the RAF stuff. I want to go into the people that got bonuses last night. So Lonnie Kavanaugh, Brandon Royval. Brandon Royval is, that was fight of the night.
Very deserving.
Yeah, and I mean, Brandon Royval literally accepted an award a couple days prior, him and Josh Van did, for Fight of the Year 2025. It's safe to say that Brandon Royval is allergic to a boring fight. The guy, you know, is, if there's one thing that he just doesn't do, it's boring fights. And Lonnie Kavanaugh showed a lot of heart in there. He showed, you know, toughness. He was hanging in there with a veteran former title challenger.
Showed some great power.
Yeah, and, you know, ultimately, Lonnie Kavanaugh may be the future, but he's still also very young. Too much too soon. What was your thoughts on that fight as a whole and Brandon Royval's win?
Brandon Royval really is the raw dog. And, man, he put the raw dog on Lonnie Kavanaugh. I thought that fight was so entertaining. And Lonnie had some great moments. I mean, he had the biggest punch landed of the night, right? He dropped Brandon Royval. We thought for a second that he would get ground and pounded and stopped right then and there. But that fight was just so back and forth and interesting. And a lot of it took place in the open stance, which I thought was very fun. As a left-handed person, I love watching a southpaw versus an orthodox. Royval was able to have a lot of success with his jab. He had a nice, clean, well-timed jab that he was able to put on Lonnie. He managed range pretty well. Now, Lonnie did get inside and found his favorite shots, which are his hands. But this fight was all about the full gambit of mixed martial arts, and it ended with a perfect cap to that, right? We're seeing Lonnie Kavanaugh unconscious on the ground at the hands of Brandon Royval. So I think that Brandon is almost like this modern-day miniature version of a Diaz brother. Maybe it's the body, right? Maybe it's the way he stands. He kind of
looks like it.
He kind of stands like them. He's always in exciting fights, but I would say he's far more entertaining and far more skillful than the Diaz brothers, even in their heyday, because what he does out there is so entertaining. Like you said, he's allergic to boring fights. He is always out there and putting it on the line. I know that BMF will never likely wind up being in the flyweight division, but God, we got to put him in there as just like a with an asterisk next to his name. Like, yeah, Brandon Royval's a BMF, even though he'll never touch that belt. But that guy is so exciting. And yeah, I think that Lonnie Kavanaugh, being this sort of blue chip prospect from the UK, everybody thought, even Ilia Topuria, right? He was on Joe Rogan talking about how he thinks Lonnie Kavanaugh will be the future of that division. I'm not willing to say that Ilia is wrong about that. I think there's time for Lonnie to grow and develop and still find his way to the top of the division. But man, when you start to find those veterans in there, and you've got about 2 or 3 fights in your UFC resume, and Brandon Royval's fought the who's who of that division for years now, you just wind up meeting a match that's a little bit more difficult than you anticipated. Sometimes veteran experience is the number one attribute to bring into the cage, and I think Brandon Royval had that on display against Lonnie.
Yeah, well said. And, you know, I think just a quick piece of technical, because you mentioned the southpaw versus the orthodox. The lead foot battle was won all night by Brandon Royval.
Yes.
Which Brandon's a little bit longer. So what I mean by that when I say lead foot is his front foot was on the outside of Lonnie's front foot, which lines Lonnie up, if you can think about it, right closer to the power.
Right.
So Brandon Royval was having great straight punch success.
And it forced Lonnie to kind of throw his two, which he was still doing, but more across his body rather than straight down the pipe, which is what Brandon Royval was actually able to do.
Exactly. And, you know, and then so you see a lot of veteran, crafty, techniques, and the front foot battle was one of the main ones, the jab, and then how he used that to set up ultimately the grappling and the submission that ended the fight. Now, he did get knocked down, as you said, which shows that Lonnie does have power at 125, which honestly, 125 actually has a few guys with some pretty serious power and finishing ability. It's actually a pretty good division, even though it's a lot of people will try to be, let's just call it like a tryhards, like I'm a diehard, like and say, 125 is the best division in the sport. It's not, right? There's just men that weigh 125 pounds. There's just not that many of them in the world compared to men that weigh 155 pounds or men that weigh 170 pounds.
Correct.
So yes, I get what people are saying, and Demetrius Johnson may have been the most skilled martial artist that we've ever seen compete, but as a whole, that division is not as deep as 155 or 170, but it is very good. So Lonnie Kavanaugh needs to go back, keep working on his technique as far as submission defense is concerned, work on getting inside on a longer fighter. He did have a lot of trouble. When he got inside, he had success, but he was kept on the outside of the jab most of the night by a crafty veteran in Royval. And I think that a little bit of cleanup, a little bit more experience, maybe give him somebody in the top 10 next, maybe 6, 7, 8, 9, something like that.
That's only 4 fights in the UFC right now. So he's still so green. And if he would have won, they would be talking about, his next fight being a title eliminator, because he's got the star power. He's an exciting fighter. And clearly he belongs in these meaningful fights. I will just say on the technical side of things, once he rocked Brandon Royval and had him down on the ground, I think he showed a lack of experience. Loney came out there and threw every bit of gas that he had left out of the tank. He was just throwing the biggest shots possible. And it's really difficult to go to a heavy bag at your local gym and just hit it for 30 seconds straight as hard as you possibly can. That's very difficult. It's even harder when that heavy bag, who is Brandon Royval, is moving around a cage and you're not just punching straight in a horizontal way at a standing opponent or a standing bag, but he's on the ground, and now your every punch that you're throwing is coming from your 5'5" or whatever stature he is all the way to the ground. You're trying to hit these massive ground and pound shots. That was a careless mistake, in my opinion. I think if he would have been a little bit wiser with his shot selection, he could have gotten Brandon Royval out of there. Instead, he chased too much. He blew all of the gas that he had left, and Brandon Royval capitalized on it in the following round, which I thought was just another wrinkle in the veteran moves that we saw on display from Raw Dog.
Yeah, totally. And so 2 performance of the night bonuses. One was Paddy. We already talked about Paddy. Yeah. The other was King Green. Yes. So Terrence McKinney, King Green, we talk about Brandon Royval being allergic to boring fights. Terrence McKinney is allergic to the second round.
Right.
He's either getting you out of there or he's getting out of there.
Yeah.
Odd sequence, right? Because Terrence McKinney dominated that fight for 4 minutes and 50 seconds.
Bloodied Bobby's face up badly.
And then Bobby got up and landed a flurry of shots, one being a body shot that appeared to have just barely grazed and almost hit the arm and then went down.
Yeah.
It didn't seem, I'm not the one who ate it, right? So who the hell am I to say? But it didn't seem like a shot that would put somebody down, but it did. And then Bobby finished with some good ground and pound. Even with 2 seconds left, this may be a controversial take, I do think it was a good stoppage. Terrence was pretty much like, he was not defending. He was shelled up, and Bobby was landing big shots. You can't just let somebody get saved by the bell and say, okay, you know what, I would stop it here, but I'm going to let them eat 4 more, because you could probably throw a shot every half a second.
Right.
I'm going to let them eat 4 more big shots just because I'm going to get them to the next round.
Right.
So I actually do think it was a reasonable stoppage. What did you think of the fight, of Bobby's finish, and then was it a good stoppage in your opinion?
Anyone that thinks Bobby Green versus Terrence McKinney was a fixed fight, which I'm starting to see that narrative.
What?
They just don't understand.
Are people saying that actually?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They're saying this was the biggest fixed fight of all time. That punch didn't even hit him. Excuse me. That punch absolutely landed. Now, did it graze off the elbow? Maybe, but that doesn't mean it took all the power off of the shot. King Green is a very tough guy, and he throws heavy shots when he does throw his hands. And it looked like it landed right there under the liver. So, usually when you throw a liver shot, it kind of digs upward, and you don't punch up under the ribs, but that's sort of the direction that you would send it, right? And it didn't look like that was the angle that it hit, but also we've seen guys get hit with shins clean across the body that hits the liver. And that certainly doesn't go directly up into the liver where you would typically see that be a fight-ending shot. I think that Terrence McKinney looked great up until that moment, but he clearly was affected by it and dropped. And, it's one of those situations where unless you've trained enough, it's really hard. And these guys are not actors, right? Terrence McKinney is not, being paid millions of dollars by Hollywood to go be an actor in a movie. What happened there was a real reaction to a liver shot. So whether the arm got in the way or not, that's what ended up the dropping Terrence McKinney and led to the ground and pound. And I will give credit to Terry Hadley. I believe that was the referee. He had his eye on the fight, and then he looked at the clock, and he saw there was 5 seconds left. And 5 seconds might not feel like a very long time, right? In regular life, 5 seconds goes by like that. But in a cage fight, 5 seconds can truly feel like an eternity. And I think Terry Hadley actually had the ability to understand that, because Terrence McKinney was taking, as you were saying, multiple shots every second for those last 5 seconds. And even though the fight did end in like the last second of the first round, I don't think that Terrence was really disputing it very much. It looked like he was kind of okay with the results, even though he wanted to get his hand raised. So I don't think that, I definitely don't think the fight was rigged. I think that Bobby Green was getting his ears boxed off, and Terrence McKinney was landing that famous power that we know from him in the first round. He's able to do a lot of damage in a very short amount of time, and he just wound up getting caught by something and couldn't recover in the time with the round left. Now, if it would have happened 2 seconds later, he probably would have made it to the bell and been able to come back out there, but that's not how the fight game works, and we see fights end with the very last seconds of a round or the very last seconds of a fight all the time. This was just one of those fights, and I think King Green came out and performed. He looked great. That's another win for King Green this late in his career.
4 in a row.
It's pretty cool. I don't think BMF is in his near future, but he certainly qualifies to be ranked in that world. So I think there's some fun fights for King Green. I don't know what they're going to do with him next. Hopefully Terrence was able to show the UFC that he's still a very fun, entertaining fighter and belongs in the UFC. I don't think there's any risk of him getting cut. So hopefully both of those guys can move on, move forward, and keep giving us some great fights.
Yeah, and also, if you're going to fix a fight, right, and just like go down the rabbit hole of ridiculousness for a second, you're going to tell the other guy, like, hey, hit me with a clean hook to the face and I'll go down.
Yeah.
Not like you're going to hit me with a grazing body shot and I'm going to pretend that it, like if you're going to sell something and potentially risk prison time, you're going to sell it off of something that's a little bit more realistic and believable. So I'm not of that mindset. Just very briefly, we touched on it in the live stream post-fight analysis last night, but Gable Steveson, really good first round knockout. You can say a lot of good things. 2 quick points of criticism, a little bit better head movement, little bit more easing into the fight and not trying to rush things so much. But that's kind of nitpicky for a 26-year-old young man who's having only his 4th professional fight, and he got a first round knockout on a UFC numbered event. So it's a lot of people are piling on to Gable, saying that wasn't a performance that shows that he's the next generation. I think that we can't really say that because Gable's being judged by a different measuring stick.
Sure.
He, like any other fighter that's having their debut in the UFC that's only 3-0, that goes out there and does that, everybody's going to be like, man, this guy's exciting. I can't wait to see what's next. But because he's potentially the most pedigreed and blue chip prospect that the UFC's ever brought in, everybody's expecting him to just mollywop everybody and be flawless. And he's showing me real ability to learn on the job. He went in there throwing techniques that John Jones throws last night, and this is a wrestler.
And looked damn good doing it.
Totally different body type than John, too. And went in there and made John's game work for his game. Now, not to the level that John did, but he's still very new. I'm very bullish on Gable. Elisha Ellison wasn't really the opponent that was going to tell us a whole lot, but it was also the right first opponent. You get him in there with a Volkov or a Salsa Boy or a Josh Hokett, that's going to tell you just how good this young man is. But I don't think you need to go there just yet. He's only 4-0. Let him go to 5-0, 6-0. When he's having his 7th fight, then you start talking about a Hokett or a Volkov or somebody who's in the top 5, top 6 of heavyweight at the time. But I think let's not do to Gable what Bellator and the MMA matchmakers over there did to Aaron Pico.
Well said.
Because if you put him against Salsa Boy or Hokit and he gets smoked and he gets finished and knocked out, then he's going to come back, and let's say his confidence isn't so great, and let's say it is Hokit and Hokit knocks him out, and then okay, now you've got Alexander Volkov, and Alexander Volkov picks him apart.
Yeah.
Now he's 4-2. Like, is this young man who has all the confidence in the world going to, be called a fraud check and, then lose that hype and stop believing in himself? I think that 26 years old is a newborn for heavyweight. Gable Steveson, the UFC needs to take their time. He's going to get there fast one way or another, because there's just only so many people at heavyweight. And if he keeps smoking people in the first round, he's going to keep moving up. But all I'm saying is make his run to the title 4 or 5 fights, not 2 or 3. That's my take on Steveson.
Gable Steveson will be world champion of the UFC. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And I agree with you. We need to see him take about 3 or 4 fights before we see him in a title fight. But the heavyweight division needs that juice that he brings. And just to talk about the fight for a second, what we saw out of him was brilliant. I mean, he's a visual learner to the highest level, and he's got the best fighter in the world as his mentor, and that's John Jones. He's in his corner. He's walking with him for the weigh-ins and everything like that. So one thing I noticed about Gable is he can watch something and then force his body, because of his athleticism and his ability as an athlete, to just go out there and do it. I'm sure he just watched John Jones throw that oblique kick, and he's like, all right, I can do that. The one kick that was even more impressive than the oblique kick, which he landed several times, was the push kick to the body. Once he had Elijah Ellison throw the high guard up because he was fearing some of the big heavy hands that Gable was throwing towards his head, that opened up the push kick beautifully. And just as you would hope, if you're in Gable Stevenson's position, the hand started to drop to now try to get the elbows or the forearms blocking those push kicks. And that's when the shots back up top then open themselves up again. So I think Gable Steveson showed us a lot of promise. Obviously, he had some, maybe a little bit of pre-fight jitters, and he came out there with a bunch of adrenaline and just came out guns a-blazing. But I also don't blame him for that, because, as you said, he is being graded on a curve, and it's not a fair curve for him. Most people say this, and there's a saying that goes in sports, like, I'll make the next one look pretty. This one, I just want to get my hand raised, right? And that's sort of the way it works. And then when that next fight comes, you go, okay, as long as I get my hand raised, I'll make the next one look pretty. Gable doesn't have that luxury. Not only is he expected to win, he's expected to go out there and have flawless victories. And that's a whole lot of pressure on a young guy like him. But if anybody can deal with it, it's Gable. So I think that the UFC has the best prospect they could possibly have in Gable Steveson. I think he is in the best gym for himself. They took John Jones over at Jackson Wink to being the greatest fighter of all time. Now they've got Jackson Wink Jim running Gable Stevenson's fight camps with John Jones as the secret weapon, sort of. And I think when you've got a guy that can learn and compete at the level that Gable has, he will become world champion. And I think that it's only going to be a matter of time, right? We had Tai Tuivasa, who was like 0-7 in his last 7 fights, and he still had a ranked number next to his name. So I would predict for you that Gable Steveson will be ranked come Tuesday, whether the AI rankings do it or the media rankings do it. Gable Steveson deserves a top 15 rank in the UFC. And I also want to say real quick to Elijah Ellison, he was the right debut opponent for Gable Steveson. A lot of people, when they get signed to fight Gable Steveson, accept defeat before the fight happened. And look, he didn't have the best performance. It didn't last all that long, but he got in there and at least tried to show him a thing or two. He stopped a takedown from the Olympic gold medalist. He actually feinted a takedown and had Gable sprawl pretty hard on it. So I think that even though it was a short-lived fight, even though the odds were stacked up against him in the biggest way possible, he still got out there and gave it his best shot. He threw some shots. He had some beautiful elbows landed, and that was also nice to see from Gable Steveson on the defensive side and on the durability side. He's able to walk into a firefight, take some shots, and beat a very athletic, durable guy like Elijah Ellison without using his wrestling, right? Yeah. So if he can continue running through the division and not have to utilize his wrestling, but become a fan favorite by knocking everybody out and getting in people's faces and throwing elbows, do some Muay Thai clinch, beautiful push kicks, teep kicks, oblique kicks, all that stuff. we're dealing with a monster and almost the most marketable and best style fighter that the UFC can sign. We've got a Olympic gold medalist wrestler who doesn't use his wrestling to win fights. As a matter of fact, he wants to knock people out cold. That's what we're going to get. And if he continues on this trajectory, not only will he become heavyweight world champion, but I think he will etch his name in the history books as one of the most dominant heavyweights that we see. Again, this is a little too early to tell, but I honestly think that Gable Steveson will make a very quick run up the rankings. I know Derek Lewis personally, and I have a feeling the call that they're going to give Derek next is going to be, hey, we want you to fight Gable Steveson, because that's the nature of this business. You were good for us one day. You had a bunch of years, and now it's your time to pass the baton. Derek Lewis, you got to pass that baton over to Gable Steveson. I think that fight makes a lot of sense next, and I'd love to see it.
There we go. And before we move into RAF, Sophie Cunningham made a cameo last night as a ring card girl of all things. And Dana White said that whole thing transpired like 5 minutes or so before she actually did the walk. And she said, look, I want to grab one of those cards and walk around. I love Sophie. I love that crossover is happening with MMA, because we've loved this sport for so long. And to see all the celebrities in there last night, to see Sophie Cunningham say, look, I just want to take a small little part of this. Can I just hold that card and walk around the octagon? Sure. She's creating a lot of viral moments right now. Everybody knows her for the point, the famous point. I thought it was cool. I love to see stuff like that that's unexpected. She got a huge roar from the crowd, so I just wanted to shout her out before we move into the RAF stuff.
Yeah, I don't watch the WNBA, but Sophie Cunningham is my favorite WNBA player. And if you ever catch me dead in a WNBA jersey, you better believe Cunningham is going to be the last name on it. I am a fan of her. And now she's gone viral to the highest level with the whole point thing at the opponent. And I just find that so entertaining, and she's really, going to be one of the girls that helps bring the WNBA to a higher level of notoriety. I mean, they were never touching my algorithm on social media until she started doing this pointing thing. And then it turns out not only is she a pretty girl and she's a great basketball player, but she's like the enforcer too. I think she's on Caitlin Clark's team, and Caitlin Clark gets all sorts of, nonsense and fouls put against her because people just don't seem to like her for whatever reason. And Sophie Cunningham is always there to back up her friend and teammate, and she'll throw somebody on the ground. She'll point at their face, especially when they don't want to be pointed at. So I really loved seeing her embedded into the UFC. I don't know if that's the UFC and Dana White's doing, or if Paramount is somebody on their team is the mind that comes up with that. Like, oh, what is Max Holloway best known for? Well, he's known for pointing on the ground. What's Sophie Cunningham known for? Because she's in the crowd right now.
Pointing at opposition.
She's known for pointing at opposition. So they had that great moment in the octagon afterwards where Max Holloway's pointing at her with her point, and she's pointing down on the ground at like Max Holloway. I thought that was a really cool on the fly type of decision that they made. And I love seeing somebody who's just down for whatever. Sophie Cunningham jumping in as a ring card girl. When I first saw her, I'm like, what do they have this ring card girl? And usually they're in like a sports bra and the UFC little shorts with the white belt on it. And this girl's just like in a nice cocktail dress or whatever it was she was wearing. I was like, wait a second.
That's Sophie Cunningham.
That's that tall girl from the WNBA. There's Sophie Cunningham. So I thought it was a great opportunity seized by the UFC. And I love seeing big sports and big stars kind of cross over with one another. And Max Holloway deserves a viral moment with Sophie Cunningham, who is taking over the everybody's algorithm as far as the internet's concerned. The
two most famous points in all of sports right now.
Yeah.
So RAF, Arman Tsarukyan. I know you've been chomping at the bit for an hour now to get into that.
That'sit.com.
Please give me your thoughts, sir.
Oh, man. Arman Tsarukyan, I think, is now 7-0 in RAF. And look, this guy just needs to get in the octagon, and they need to give him a world title shot. But I love how active he's being outside of the octagon. Not only is he going viral every week with a live stream, whether it's with Nina Drama or it's with Neon or whoever it is that he teams up with for that week, but he's also flying everywhere around the world now, right? RAF was doing a lot of American cards. This one was over in Georgia.
Tbilisi.
Yeah, I knew I would mess that name up. Tbilisi, Georgia. And he goes out there and fights a guy who, I don't even know his name. I saw it, but I'm not going to try to recreate it because I'm bad with last names. But he goes out there, gets another 10-0. I think it technically would have been 11-0, but the mercy rule is 10. So he scored 11 points unanswered it made it look really good. Some beautiful takedown attempts. His shots are so fast. He's able to change his levels and shoot in even when the guy is fully ready to snap down. He's in his wrestling position. Arman doesn't have any worries with that. He's able to find really good opportunities for his wrestling. For a guy who's not credentialed in wrestling but just has a background as a wrestler is very impressive to me. And by the way, if you weren't aware, he wrestles Colby Covington on RAF next weekend, I think in Milwaukee. So the guy is literally probably in Georgia right now. Maybe he'll have a little meal before he gets on his private jet, shoots over to Milwaukee, and then it's fight week once again for Arman Tsarukyan. But I would be lying if I didn't say I love watching him do RAF, all that stuff. I love the Hype Brazil. I love the live streams, but that might be the best lightweight in the world, and we need to see him fighting in the octagon. There's so many fun options at 155 for him right now, and I honestly think if they give him one more fight, he beats whoever it is in front of him, whether it's Charles Oliveira, Paddy the Baddy, Ilia Topuria, and if he can beat one of those guys, I don't see why they don't give him a world title shot. So yeah, I hope that Arman Tsarukyan can get back in the cage soon. Even though I love watching him on the wrestling mats, it's not quite the same as him on a UFC card.
Yeah, and the thing about Arman, and I agree with you, he's one of the biggest stars in the sport, but we all said after the Dan Hooker win, this guy probably deserves a title.
Right.
But it's been almost a year since that Dan Hooker win, and while he's been doing great things outside the octagon, there's been no activity inside the octagon, and the wheels keep turning, as they say. Paddy the Baddy, spectacular win last night. Yeah. Max Holloway, even though it was at 170, got a win. Charles looked pretty good against Max. You know, Charles had a close fight with Arman. He's been very active and put on a nice streak since that loss. So Arman is quickly kind of not becoming irrelevant because he's a big star, but as far as title contention, if the UFC wants to give it to the most deserving people, there are people that are getting ahead of him on that ladder now. So I would like to see him come back. I'd like to see him get a win because I would like to see Arman in a world title fight, and hopefully he can do it off of another win. One more thing, the local hero Merab Dvalishvili in Tbilisi. We can't talk about RAF and not shout out his win over Henry Cejudo, a come from behind victory against an Olympic gold medalist. No less.
Well, he was down 8 or 9 to nothing and was able to come back and win. Like the heart of a champion and a true competitor, Merab Dvalishvili is. He's so skilled. And look, Henry Cejudo is a guy that has been out of competition for a while. And we've seen Merab staying very active not only in the UFC, but also in RAF. He's competing all the time. So obviously when you've got a little bit of ring rust or mat rust, if we want to, tie it over to wrestling, Cejudo hasn't been training. He's a little bit undersized compared to Merab Dvalishvili. Remember, majority of his career was spent at 125, and I don't know what he wrestled at, but probably somewhere around the 118.
I think 121.
Yeah, something like that. So I find it very impressive that he was able to not only beat Henry Cejudo in MMA, but also take all of the MMA skills off the table, and he can go out there and beat the Olympic gold medalist in wrestling as well. So yeah, I love Merab Dvalishvili. I think that good things should continue to happen to him. I love that they were able to go to his home country and put on a banger event. They said it was a lot of fun over there. Yeah, that's about it for the UFC guys that competed on RAF. Sadulayev had his knee torn by Kyle Snyder, which I think they've fought multiple times, and it's been since about 2017 that Kyle Snyder has actually beaten Sadulayev. So that was a big moment, a big feather in his cap for him for sure, but it does suck to see a guy who is hoping to go into another Olympic tournament for the next Olympics in 2028, but now that could be derailed, right? I think he has 2 Olympic gold medals, and if he were to go for the trifecta, that'd be very impressive. But it appeared to me, by the way he was conceding getting pinned by Kyle Snyder, that he for sure tore something in his leg. They ushered him off that mat very quickly, so maybe him and Conor McGregor are going to have a very similar surgery following this weekend, this eventful but very unfortunate weekend for both men. Knee injuries were abundant, and hopefully this doesn't derail his Olympic aspirations for the 3rd time in a row. But I certainly think that RAF is doing a lot of good things. They're making some really fun matches, and Yeah, I just hope we get to see another fun, exciting fight next weekend in Milwaukee for Arman Tsarukyan.
Likewise. And guys, thank you so much for watching this episode. Come back midweek. We are going to be predicting and breaking down Dricus du Plessis, Kamaru Usman, talking about the hot news topics and some maybe updates on Conor McGregor if a medical report comes out. So make sure, if you're not already, that you're subscribed to the channel. Do that now. It helps us tremendously and it costs you nothing, and you won't miss one of our videos. And until then, have a wonderful day.
Peace.